Martin Bach's body was in the express lane at Oak Street Market, but his mind was in a German cathedral where Luther had preached, belting out "A Mighty Fortress is Our God" with his church's choir at a service commemorating the 500th anniversary of Lutheranism in 2 months that were like a year-long shift on the self-checkouts. Reformation history had been his passion since his maternal grandmother had gifted him a copy of Here I Stand for his 13th birthday, which incidentally was October 31st, the day in which the 95 Theses made their 1517 debut. She had wanted to visit the landmarks of their faith since her confirmation, but her vacationless job as a head teller in a bank kept her Wisconsin-bound during her career. After she retired, a frustrating heart condition sabotaged any serious thoughts about European travel. When she passed away, Martin vowed that before his own retirement he would visit Germany so his grandmother's spirit could vicariously travel with him. As soon as he saw the email from his choir director announcing the ensemble's impending Teutonic tour and absorbed the historical and personal impact of the journey, he canceled his cable and Amazon Prime services and began to sock away every cent he didn't need for food and essential utilities for what he called his bucket list pilgrimage. Only $500 more and I'll... Martin Bach, dial 428. There was an uncharacteristic abrasiveness in the usually diplomatic voice of his manager, Carl Whitney, as it lunged from the PA system and strangled the cashier's optimistic tranquility. Martin complied as soon as his lane was customer-free, praying with each ring that Carl merely wanted him to work a few hours on his next weekend off. After 7 increasingly demoralizing rings, the manager picked up. "Martin, you have something to sign at the office." "Customer compliment?" inquired Martin, with slender hope that his manager's unusual gruffness was simply justification for his decision to never aspire to a more stressful career than cashiering. "No, checker timings." The agitated disappointment in Carl's tone suggested that his productivity at the register had been inferior to the manager's standards for at least 2 weeks. However, considering that Martin hadn't signed anything that questioned his efficiency since the Bears had lost the Super Bowl, he refused to believe that the document he would be confronted with would hinder his German travel prospects until he went on break and discovered he had been scanning only 25 items per minute, 10 items below the required speed, for a month, which meant an instant year-long demotion to bagger and the demoralizing prospect of being the only member of his choir who would be watching the most important worship service in half a millennia on YouTube. "Why didn't you tell me my timings were down the first week they dipped below 35? Asked Martin. "Because until this month you were my fastest checker, and I thought your efficiency would rebound before I'd have to demote you," was Carl's cluelessly arrogant response. "When your dad was in charge of cashier productivity, he always told us if we'd had a slow week as soon as the timings came out of the printer," Martin observed. "Fair enough," replied Carl, "but unfortunately my father got a bleeding ulcer because if one cashier had bad timings for a week, he wouldn't sleep until he was confident he wouldn't have to demote that person. That's why I'm the efficiency manager now, and everyone except you thinks I take a much more sensible approach to the job than he did, which is another reason why I shouldn't let you be a checker anymore. You need to learn your role in this store." Martin was stunned by this unexpected humiliation, for if he truly had a problem regarding the knowledge of his place, he would have asked Carl if his father had also made him the store mind reader. But he was as old school as a register where the prices popped up on plastic tabs, so he continued to absorb Carl's merciless critique of his work habits. "If you hadn't been spending half your shifts on the express lane, you'd still be a checker." "I'd work that register as much as I did because it faces the front doors, and the lady who is usually assigned to that machine catches a cold every time she has to be there," Martin explained. "Was she paying you to switch registers with her?" asked Carl, who obviously couldn't comprehend the validity of a selfless, cashless deal between employees. "No, I switched with her, because Jesus would have done likewise," replied Martin, who normally wasn't inclined to preach to his manager, but then he'd never had a 20-year dream annihilated by an unfair demotion before. "Jesus doesn't work here," scoffed Carl. "Now get your God-loving butt outside and start worshiping the carts into the store, or you're fired." Martin couldn't afford to ponder the possibility that he'd been demoted because he was a humanitarian Christian, because if he couldn't afford to go to Germany, he certainly didn't have the funds to sue his manager for violating his right to freedom of religion. As he walked home, he prayed that when Jesus said, "Blessed are ye when men shall persecute you for my sake," that promise still applied to him. As soon as he locked his front door, he turned on the computer so he could check his internet bank statement and find out exactly when he'd have to swap his frugally classy bungalow for a decrepit efficiency apartment. The semi-morbid nature of this task made his fingers quiver to the extent that it took 4 attempts to type the right password. When his fatalistic pupils caught the amount next to his checking account number, they nearly sprang onto the keyboard, not because there wasn't enough in the account to pay for a pack of ramen, but because the balance was precisely $20,000, which was more than what he needed for his German excursion and bill payments until he could acquire a more lucrative job. A $15,000 windfall from an anonymous individual that had been deposited 20 minutes ago was the only explanation for the shocking quadrupling of the balance. Martin's initial impulse was to find out who had sent him such a titanic amount and immediately refund it. His Protestant work ethic had conditioned him to believe that any money, except for the $20 Visa gift cards his grandmother gave him every birthday, was not justifiably his unless it had been earned by legitimate toil. There was a new clerical employee at Oak Street Market who was notorious for making typos and other rookie errors while processing payroll transactions, but was never reprimanded for her incompetence because she was Carrie Whitney, Carl's sister. Martin made $500 a week, and he wouldn't put it past an individual who frequently listened to audiobooks of mystery novels while doing a haphazard imitation of her job to add an extra 1 and a 0 to his weekly wages and forget to make sure that the name of the store appeared next to the amount. As he dialed his workplace's number, he prayed that Cynthia Anderson, his perpetually understanding personnel manager, would pick up. Instead, he felt his nerves being tossed into a hell of awkwardness when Carl answered the phone with a surly, "Oak Street Market, this is Carl Whitney, how can I help you?" that only he could get away with, because his figurehead of a father didn't have the executive nerve to demote him. "This is Martin Bach. According to my bank statement, it looks like I got paid a little too much this week." "You won't be saying that again for the next year," replied the manager with the same smug disdain he had earlier applied to Martin's religion. "I know, sir, but I still got paid 15 grand instead of $500 this week," insisted Martin. "If that's what you think, then you're either telling me my sister doesn't know how to do her job, or you're confessing to robbing your till." Martin knew that the vocalization of either possibility was equally likely to disintegrate his career. "Then there must have been a mistake on my bank statement." "I think you knew that before you wasted my time with something that can't be blamed on either Carrie or myself," Carl frigidly observed before terminating the conversation. As Martin phoned the Milwaukee Street Credit Union, he could have mentally booted himself in his absent-minded backside for not calling them before agitating a boss who was so close to firing him he could smell the ink in Carl's vengeful fountain pen as it signed his pink slip. He was on hold for 10 minutes, not because of other customers, but because of an unusual anecdote the head teller apologetically shared with him. For the last half hour, the credit union had been besieged by a cardinal which had flown into the building and perched behind the counter on top of a computer keyboard as if it was employed there. If a teller ventured within 2 inches of the machine in question, the bird would peck the back of his or her hand as if she was defending a nestful of chicks. But what was more worrisome to the employees than the cardinal's aggressiveness was that she was manipulating the keys with her beak with human accuracy. Eventually, the head teller was able to bribe the bird from the keyboard with a small piece of watermelon from her lunch bag, though until the cardinal grabbed the fruit from her unsure fingers, she had never assumed that cardinals relished anything besides worms, and neither her or her colleagues had any time to ponder his food preferences, because after barricading it in the ladies' room and calling animal control, they were more preoccupied with the unnerving prospect of the cardinal being the winged prodigy of a hacker, because right after the head teller had lured the creature from the keyboard, she observed to her immeasurable astonishment that it had somehow accessed the account of Martin Bach and had deposited 15 grand into that account. "Do you want me to void that deposit?" she inquired. Martin compared the nightmarish possibility of a sinister benefactor using the devious access he now had to his cash to manipulate him into criminality to 15 grand being refunded to a lowlife who would just use that money to fund an ungodly lifestyle. "No, I'll just change my password," replied Martin. However, the completion of this chore didn't make that deposit any less of a sinful eyesore, especially when contrasted with hundreds of honest payroll transactions. He was seconds from donating the entire amount to his church's remodeling fund, the only strategy he could think of using to cleanse the tainted funds, when a cardinal alighted on his living room windowsill with a one-page letter protruding from its beak. An apparitional voice in his brain told him it was the same bird who had patronized the credit union on his behalf that afternoon, and because the prophetic consolation in its tone resembled that of his grandmother, he was soothingly reassured that the message the cardinal had delivered had not been authored by a scheming identity thief, and that there was nothing questionable about the moral integrity of the Windfall or Martin's entitlement to it. After opening the window, he half expected to be pursuing an elusively feisty cardinal around his home for the next hour, as if his residence was no more than an annex to the credit union. Instead, the bird calmly permitted Martin to extract the letter from its beak and read what was undoubtedly a communication from the eternal address of Grandma Bach. The exquisite handwriting was precisely as it had been 20 years ago, before arthritis made it necessary for Martin or his mother to write legible checks for her. The letter read, "Dear Martin, since my heavenly rejuvenation, I've been joyfully employed as head teller at the bank that is always open for the children of God. Normally, our safe only stores one type of check, the promissory note signed by the Holy Spirit at your baptism, endorsed by you at your confirmation, and to only be cashed when your soul walks into our lobby. However, your Christian selflessness and compassion for your co-workers, which you were persecuted and disciplined for by your faithless manager, has moved the boss, who outranks all earthly employers, to enable you to share your musical gift with the one who bestowed it on you at the birthplace of your faith. This is not a loan, for Jesus' full payment for your sins on the cross permanently closed our lending department over 2 centuries ago. I am confident that your gratitude for this unusual gift will be embodied in your continuing generosity towards your colleagues and a refusal to begrudge your manager for his unjust behavior, as you remember that Jesus said, 'Love your enemies, bless them that curse you. Love, Grandma Bach.' The end."